We should. Yeah. I was gonna say, otherwise that's training piece number 1.
Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome all to our special council meeting today, April 23rd. We welcome Michelle and Michelle to our meeting. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So confirmation of the agenda is the first item on the agenda. Jason moves. Second is Jim. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest related to any item on today's agenda? Not seeing any. If one should arise during the course of the meeting, you can declare it at that time. We will be going into resolve into committee of the whole. Do I have a mover for that motion to do that? Martin and Barb, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. We need to appoint a chair. Now that we have resolved, someone suggest a nomination. Barb?
Through you, I nominate the mayor, Brian Milne, as the chair of the committee of the whole.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Joan, thank you. Any other nominations? Okay, all those in favor? That is carried. So once again, you're stuck with me. Yep. Delegations and presentations. So once again, I see we have Michelle and Michelle here with us this morning. So I need a motion to receive their report. Martin, thank you. Seconded by Joan. Now that we have that on the table, welcome, ladies. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
sorry, and good afternoon. I'm Mr. Mayor, members of council and staff. We're going to be taking some time this afternoon to walk through your draft procedural bylaw and offer some insights in how to use that bylaw to make your meetings more effective and efficient. We're not saying that they're not already, but there certainly are some techniques that you can use to do that. We have a lot to cover off here, actually. And so if you have any questions along the way, we're just asking that you ask the question at that time that we're part of that presentation, and we're happy to kind of answer any questions. We'll do that at the end as well. And we will be sharing the presentation and the slides with staff, so you'll be sure to get a copy of that. Okay. So before we introduce ourselves, we just wanted to commend council and staff for taking some time midterm to take a look at your procedure bylaw and do some training with that as well. A little bit about us. We are Clerks on Call. We provide training in several areas of municipal governance and administration. We want you to know that we're not professional speakers, but rather experienced municipal practitioners that use our experience to help guide municipal councils and staff. to help develop and achieve their goals. And we truly believe that responsive, customized, need-based training makes a difference between a good municipal team and a great one. So I'm Michelle Smybert. I've been involved on the administration side for local government for over 30 years and recently became an elected official for Thames Centre. And I believe that this new work allows me to use a bit of a different lens when offering some training and development needs for staff and council. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Michelle, and I'll have her introduce herself to you.
Thank you.
So as Michelle said, I'm Michelle Casavecchia Summers, or Michelle number 2, as we sometimes refer to each other, since there's 2 of us. And I too have had more than 30 years of municipal experience as a CAO and a municipal clerk. And when I retired a few years ago, I realized that I really missed being involved in municipal government. And I decided to kind of change my focus a little bit and became a municipal management consultant and trainer. And this has really allowed me to be able to continue to use my years of experience to be able to help other councils and staff with different aspects of municipal work. Back to you, Michelle.
Okay, so what we're going to cover off this afternoon is the process that we use to develop your draft procedure bylaw, including some of the guiding principles behind that. We're going to talk about procedure bylaws in general, what they are and why they are so important to our council meetings. We're also going to talk about some of the legislative framework affecting procedure bylaws, but really the bulk of our time will be reviewing the draft procedure bylaw with you. So we've worked with staff to review and update Southgate's procedure bylaw, and we want to acknowledge the great input that we received from the clerk and the deputy clerk during the process. It was really invaluable and it added significant depth to our review. And we are proposing some changes to your procedure bylaw. And it's really to reflect any updates to the Municipal Act, meeting best practices and other procedural matters that were identified by staff that should have been updated. So when drafting the new procedure bylaw, we took into consideration these internal policies. So we have the accountability and transparency policy, accessibility policies, public notification policy, and you have an electronic participation policy. As well, we considered best practices for municipal meetings. If there were changes that you could make to your procedures, again, to make meetings more efficient and effective, and whether or not modifications could be made to promote decorum in both council and the public, and whether updates could be made to promote public involvement. So those were our guiding principles as we reviewed your procedure bylaw. And finally, we wanted to make sure that the new proposed bylaw answered all 5 W's, and that is who. The bylaw must provide guidance for council, staff, and the public. What? It's a playbook really for council meetings and outlines the rules to be followed. The where, it addresses the location of meetings and provides direction for both virtual and in-person meetings. And when, it includes reference to current legislative requirements. And why, to ensure consistency, accountability, and transparency.
So now that we've outlined with you the process that we used and some of the guiding principles of the procedure bylaw review, let's talk for a minute about the purpose of procedure bylaws and why they're so important. So every municipality in Ontario is required to have a procedure bylaw, and it's a legal document that's created by a municipality that directs the way that council and committee meetings run. They tell your public what rules exist to govern how meetings are called, where they take place, the procedures that must be followed for discussions and decision-making. And having an effective procedure bylaw can lead to more productive meetings and ultimately can help council to reach its goals. So generally, procedure bylaws describe how meetings are to be conducted, how decisions are to be made and recorded, how participants are to be involved in meetings, and how other meeting matters such as meeting schedules are handled. They define and ensure open meetings, and additionally, they specify how notice is to be given to the public, how the public will be engaged and involved in your meetings, which helps promote a culture of inclusivity in your governance processes. So George Brusty, who is one of Canada's leading municipal lawyers, notes that the purpose of procedures is to seek to achieve consensus in an orderly and principled manner. So council rules of procedure really should be based on this principle, ensuring that all voices are heard and decisions are made in a fair manner. And while some elements of your procedure bylaw are legislatively required, Your procedure bylaw really should reflect what Southgate's council wants to see as far as your procedures. By undertaking regular reviews of the bylaw, like you're doing right now, it ensures that your bylaw continues to meet legislative requirements and also helps to identify any areas of improvement. And as well, by keeping your bylaw updated, you're also able to adapt to changing circumstances and ensure that the bylaw continues to be efficient and assist with decision-making. So council's commitment to transparency and accountability is really crucial to building trust with the public. And council's relationships with the public is often described in your policies. And in addition to other policies that you have, such as your notice policy, accountability transparency policy, and delegation of authority policy, your procedure bylaw really helps you promote transparency in order to build a positive relationship with the public. And in addition to building that positive relationship with the public, here are some other benefits of having good procedures. How you manage and run your council meetings is really one of the biggest risk factors for participation and contribution. And having robust procedures may help council set a positive tone for your meetings. You should be able to expect transparent, accessible, and legislatively sound proceedings at council and committee meetings, and a good procedure bylaw will lay the groundwork for that to happen. And it's important that council makes the most of your time together, as this really is the time when your authority is being exercised. It's essential to recognize that the way meetings are conducted can significantly impact engagement levels. So investing in good procedures is a strategic move that pays off in the long run. And what happens if your rules of procedure are weak? We live in an area of high flux and change. There's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and often ambiguity. And this poses new and unique challenges in every council meeting, as decisions that are made can be legally binding. When your procedure bylaw is not clear or up to date, then your municipality could actually face some legal challenges. And for this reason, it's critical that council decisions be made in accordance with the correct meeting procedures. If the correct procedures are not followed, it could provide the opportunity for the decision of council to be challenged. And an example that we can think of is with respect to closed meetings. If there was a closed meeting investigation and it was determined that the proper meeting procedures were not being followed, then it could leave council's decision that was made during that meeting open to being challenged. And finally, when we discuss procedure bylaws, it's really important to remember that first and foremost, they're a team building tool. And if everyone commits to learning the procedural basics, then your council and committee meetings will be much more effective.
Okay, so now let's take a look at the legislation that municipalities must abide by. So municipalities have, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wonder if I go back to the meeting could be challenged, like challenged by who, I guess? Yeah, like legally challenged or, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it could be a member of the public, it could be a contractor, a developer. There's many different scenarios depending on what you were speaking about and what the
Sure.
procedure was that wasn't followed. But yes.
But we hope you don't get to that point,
Yeah.
though, right?
Which is why we're providing you with the new draft procedure bylaw that meets those legislative requirements.
So yes, so we'll take a look at the legislation. So the municipalities, of course, are creatures of the province and are entirely reliant on our provincial legislation. And the Municipal Act is undoubtedly the most important piece of legislation governing all Ontario municipalities. Excuse me. The Municipal Act stipulates that every council must establish a number of different policies and processes. And this slide lists some of the most significant ones, including the requirement to have a procedure bylaw. Now let's talk about some of the specific actions of the Act. So as I mentioned, it's the Municipal Act that sets out the requirement for procedure bylaws. It's section 238 of the Act, and it's quite prescriptive in many instances. For example, in the first bullet point, section 238 subsection 2 requires every municipality to pass a procedure bylaw. In the second bullet point, section 238 subsection 2.1 requires that the bylaw must also provide for public notice of all your meetings. So these two sections are mandatory, whereas the last bullet point, section 234 subsection 4, is optional. It states that the procedure bylaw may, with the consent of the head of council, designate a member of council other than the head of council to preside at meetings of council. Section 230 of the Act states that the procedure bylaw should detail when inaugural council meetings will be held. And Section 236 subsection 1 states that council is to hold its meetings within the municipality or an adjacent municipality, and that the location of the meeting should be set out in the procedure bylaw. Although obviously in the case of an emergency, council does have the option to hold its meetings at any convenient location, either within or outside the municipality. Quorum is dealt with in Section 237, and generally quorum means the majority of members of council. A properly convened meeting requires a quorum of members to be present. Quorum may be affected by declarations of pecuniary interest. And if there is no quorum due to declarations, then it's actually Section 7 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act that indicates there can be no less than 2 members. So all of your meetings require a quorum, and we're going to talk about quorum requirements for public meetings under the Planning Act specifically later on in the presentation. And here are a couple of other optional sections of the Act that relate to procedure bylaws. Section 238, subsection 3.1 and 3.3 address electronic participation of members. Electronic participation was added to the Municipal Act a few years ago during COVID, and it's become a vital way to conduct council and committee meetings today if you're unable to attend in person. Although we still recommend that in-person attendance is best for meetings. And again, we're going to talk a bit more about that later in the presentation. Holding open meetings is one of the best ways that council can demonstrate transparency, which is why Section 239, subsection 1 of the Municipal Act requires that all meetings of council, local boards, and committees are to be open to the public. Open meetings allow residents to understand how and why a council made a decision or approved or adopted a resolution or bylaw. However, Section 239, subsection 2 states that a meeting can be closed to the public if it satisfies one of the prescribed conditions and council follows the prescribed process to close that meeting. And the procedure bylaw really is a tool to help guide both council and the public through these situations. So council members should be familiar with the list of permitted matters for which a closed meeting may be held, but we're just going to review them if you don't. So this slide contains 8 of those exceptions, and they include security of municipal property, personal matters about an identifiable individual, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land, labor relations and employee negotiations, litigation or potential litigation, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, and a matter permitted under another act to be considered in closed meeting, information explicitly supplied in confidence by Canada or a province or a territory or crown agency. And then we have 5 other, limited exceptions that were recently added, and they include a trade secret or other information supplied in confidence that if it was to be disclosed could be expected to prejudice significantly a competitive situation or a position, a trade secret or other information that belongs to the municipality and has monetary value or potential monetary value, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations, training or education purposes, as long as it doesn't advance the business of the municipality or council decision-making. And finally, consideration of a freedom of information request. So if the subject matter of the closed meeting does not fall within one of these prescribed exemptions, then the meeting must be held in open session.
Okay, so we've now reviewed what a procedure,
Question
oh,
here.
sorry,
Sorry. No,
my apologies.
Barb?
No, I was just wondering if we want to hold our questions to the end or just to that point, we're having our training session in open. We could have gone into closed, except that the procedure bylaw could materially advance the business of the corporation. I'm just wondering why it was chosen. I'm great that it's in open session, and I think it's great that it is in open session. Just wondering why it was chosen to be an open.
So the exemptions that are outlined, they're optional. So you can only go into closed session for those purposes, but it doesn't mean you have to always go into closed session for those purposes. And our personal recommendation is that you should be doing as much in open session as you can in order to meet the principles of transparency and accountability. So this particular training session, yes, you could have potentially gone into closed session to be able to hear the information that we're going to present. You wouldn't be able to then debate or discuss whether or make a decision on whether you're going to approve the draft bylaw in that closed meeting. That would be something that would have to be done in open session. But you could, have received the general information in closed, because that just receiving the information is not advancing the business of the municipality. Does that answer?
Yes, I feel that this type of training, the procedural bylaw specifically, does advance the business, and therefore it should be an open, because as it says, we may go into closed without advancing business or council decision making. So I just appreciated the distinguishing between the two. Thank you.
And I think it's important too, now that council meetings are live streamed. It gives the public the opportunity to hear about the principles and what the draft bylaw really is all about as well.
Okay, so we've reviewed what the procedure bylaw is, the process that was used to develop the new draft bylaw, and the legislative framework that affect it. So let's now take a look at some of the specific sections of the new draft bylaw. But before I get into some of those specifics, I want to mention that designing a procedure bylaw requires careful consideration of both local needs and legal requirements. You need to ensure that the essential elements of the bylaw content are included, such as the types of meetings, agenda processes, meeting procedures, decorum and conduct, public participation, those types of things, which are of course included in the draft bylaw. But it's also to remember that the objective of your procedures are really to facilitate, not frustrate your meetings, which means that the structure and content of the bylaw must also be user-friendly. And we have included a table of contents to help in navigating the bylaw and presented the content in a logical sequence. As well, the new draft bylaw includes applicable legislative references, and in several areas, we've restated those legislative references as a best practice so that everything is accessible in one document. And finally, changes that were made to enhance transparency and accountability in council operations itself. So as I mentioned, when drafting the new procedure bylaw, it's important to keep the information in sections that staff and council can easily refer to without having to read the entire bylaw to find the particular part that you want to reference. So it's for this reason that we've divided the new bylaw into 5 major sections. So a general section, duties and conduct, meetings, public participation, and motions. So the first section is the general section, and as you can expect, it really sets out some of the general guidelines and sets the tone for the rest of the procedure bylaw. So this slide includes some of the new or updated sections. So the new bylaw still specifies that Robert's Rules of Order is your secondary parliamentary source in the event that your procedure bylaw does not capture a particular situation. Using Robert's Rules of Order is standard across most municipalities in Ontario. And we've also included the meeting principles that we mentioned earlier to help establish a foundation for the rest of the bylaw. And the new draft bylaw still allows for a suspension of rules should it become necessary during council's deliberations. And there is a new section that allows the clerk to make administrative changes to correct minutes, bylaws, and such without the need to actually have to come back to council for formal amendments when it's just a little minor correction. And we've updated the definitions section by adding some new definitions and expanding some of the existing ones to enhance everyone's understanding of the various terms. So this slide outlines the meeting principles that have been incorporated into Southgate's new draft bylaw. And these principles really are fundamental and are used by many different municipalities in Ontario. And they include that the majority must be allowed to rule. The minority have rights that must be respected, and they must be heard too. All members have a right to information to help make decisions. Courtesy and respect are required. All members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And members have a right to an efficient meeting, and we're going to talk lots more about that throughout the presentation.
So the next section of the bylaw relates to duties and the conduct of the chair, members, and the attendees, as well as addresses rules of debate in dealing with questions from members. And while your current procedure bylaw does deal with all of these matters, the new draft bylaw does contain some additional detail relating to these duties. So we're going to take some time to review it. And we've also included within the presentation some other material that might help to better illustrate some of those roles and responsibilities of members and to reinforce the rules of debate. So let's talk about the role of the chair. Their primary role is to facilitate and chair meetings for effective participation and decision-making, but how they actually do this is not really an easy task. The chair facilitates the decision-making process by ensuring that the meeting runs smoothly. They need to make sure that all the members have equal opportunity to participate and that all the agenda items are discussed. They also need to make sure that all decisions of council are clear and everyone understands what action items need to be followed up on. And the chair should be succinct, should speak last after everyone else has had a chance. And remember, if the chair wants to debate or make motions, then they really should relinquish the chair for that purpose. So with these points in mind, let's take a look specifically at the duties of the chair that are outlined in Section 8 of Southgate's new draft bylaw. And your current bylaw, just for reference, does include the duties of the chair. So this new draft bylaw expands a bit more on the duties with some updated language, including that the mayor shall be the chair for all meetings so that business can be carried out efficiently and effectively. As well, it's the duty of the chair to open the meeting by taking the chair and calling the members to order, announce the business before the council or committee and the order in which it's to be acted upon, maintain order and preserve the decorum of the meeting, rule on all procedural matters, receive and submit to a vote all motions presented, decline to put any motions to a vote which do not comply with the rules of procedure, announce the result of the vote on any motions presented for a vote, expel any person whom the chair feels exhibits improper conduct, adjourn or suspend the meeting if there's grave disorder, recess the meeting, after issuing appropriate warning, may order any members to leave or request the CAO to contact security or the police to assist, may call a vote on the question of sustaining the ruling of the chair, may call a brief recess to consult with the CAO or the clerk, recess the meeting if imminent threat of health or safety, ensure all members who wish to speak do so. And finally, the bylaw also states that's the duty of the chair to ensure clarity of all motions before voting, vote on all matters unless disqualified to do so, adjourn the meeting, and authenticate all bylaws. So really, the previous slides pointed out that the chair really has many, many responsibilities, and the chair definitely sets the tone for meetings. Essentially, all of these functions of the chair really fall into three categories. It's all about managing time, people, as well as the agenda. However, the final piece of the puzzle is that the chair needs to be aware of all of these things. And after more than 30 years in municipal administration, Michelle and I have found that sometimes the chairs are not familiar with all of the various aspects of their role. So it's important that chairs also receive proper training or onboarding, as it's important for them to provide the necessary facilitation for successful meetings.
And while it's the role of the chair to maintain order at a meeting, it's the role of each individual council member to govern their own conduct at meetings. Generally, each council member must ensure that they understand the agenda and the purpose of the meeting. And at a minimum, all members must come to the meeting having read all of the agenda materials beforehand. And unfortunately, we've seen over the years, sometimes that doesn't always happen. So, and generally, each council member must ensure that they understand the agenda and the purpose. Oops, I just said that. My apologies. Looking at my notes twice. Members are to contribute to their insights during the discussions of the agenda items and contribute to a positive, safe atmosphere. And for effective deliberations, all members should present their comments and their ideas as concisely as possible. So Section 10 of the new draft bylaw states that all council and committee meetings have the following duties. All members shall attend scheduled meetings. We recognize that you likely won't be able to attend every single meeting during your term, but the intent of this clause in the procedure bylaw is to remind members that they're to strive to attend as many of the scheduled meetings as possible. Members are also to carefully consider and make decisions about the business of the meeting, and this includes seeking information and advice from your staff prior to and during a meeting. You need to remember that staff are your subject matter experts, and they should be your go-to if you have any questions. All council members are to vote on all motions that are put to a vote unless they're disqualified from voting under any statute, and that might be conflict of interest. All members must respect the rules of order that are set out in the bylaw. And they need to listen attentively, participating in the meeting and not interrupting unless it's to raise a point of order or a point of privilege. And you need to as well refrain from using any offensive, disrespectful, or unparliamentary language during the meeting. Members should also refrain from speaking disrespectfully of the reigning sovereign and other significant dignitaries. And of course, all members should respect and follow the decisions of council and committee. And this one can sometimes be a bit challenging, but it's really important in maintaining public trust to refrain from criticizing the decisions of council. You can definitely disagree with an action or a motion and vote against it at a meeting. But once the decision is made by council, you as a member must stand behind that majority decision. Members must also respect the confidentiality of matters that are discussed in closed meetings, and of course, not disclose the subject or substance of any of those discussions unless you've been specifically authorized to do so by council or the committee. And lastly, all members must comply with the ruling of the chair and the decisions of council and committee. And while some of you may feel that these points that were included in the last few slides are pretty basic, in the past few years, more and more we're finding that council members in some municipalities are not necessarily following these fundamentals. We've seen a lack of decorum and some council members that behave very poorly in some meetings. You've likely come across this in the media during the course of your review or research. City of Sarnia, for one, has been in the media a lot in the last few years and is probably a prime example of what not to be doing. So we include these duties in the bylaw just to remind council members. And we want to emphasize that if everyone understands what their duties are and commit to using proper decorum, the end result will be that you'll work really well together as a team and you'll be able to accomplish a successful meeting. And so now we've talked about the role of the chair and the role of council members. So let's review quickly the duties of the other participants to your meetings, and that's those that are attending. So attendees include persons that might be making a presentation or a delegation to council, or maybe making a comment in the open forum part of your meeting. And we believe that it's just as important to establish responsibilities for attendees as it is for council members themselves. Those duties are outlined in Section 7 of the draft bylaw and include maintaining order and not heckling or engaging in side conversations or disrupting the meeting in any way. And in the event of such disruptive behavior, the chair has the authority to be able to ask that person to leave if they are disrupting. Attendees are also not to display any placards or props or display any behavior that may interfere with the meeting, or they too may be asked to leave. Attendees must speak respectfully at all times, and they need to ensure that they do not interrupt any speech or any action of council members or any other person that might be addressing council. And they're to ensure that any electronic or digital devices are turned off or set to silent mode. So there are no disruptions. And no attendee shall use an electronic device to broadcast, record, or otherwise publish or distribute any audio or video of the meeting. And finally, attendees should circulate all materials that they wish council to consider through the clerk for distribution. And we recognize that most attendees to your council and committee meetings have not likely read council's procedure bylaw. So in order to ensure that attendees are familiar with these duties, we would suggest that you consider posting signage that clearly states what these duties are, either in the council chambers itself or possibly in the lobby moving or leading into council chambers. And this really helps everyone to understand what their obligations and responsibilities are, even before they actually get in front of council to make their presentation or their comment.
Okay. So now that we understand the roles and the responsibilities of the various meeting participants, let's talk about how we manage those meeting conversations and discussions. And while there are foundations in place to ensure good and effective meetings, sometimes there are conversations or discussions that happen in meetings that make the meeting less effective. So we believe that this slide depicts the number one reason why so many meetings might go on a little bit longer than necessary. The chair, of course, wants to encourage everyone to participate fully. But the key thing to remember when participating in a discussion at council is that the discussion in these settings is not a conversation. The fluid give and take of conversation is one of life's joys, of course, but a governing body meeting together is organized on very different principles than a group of friends gathering. So being clear on this from the start will make the meetings more efficient and effective. And managing meeting conversations means having and using proper rules of debate. Procedure bylaws should include guidelines for how debate should be conducted, including rules regarding speaking limits, recognition by the chair, and maintaining decorum. So the updated rules of debate are outlined in section 12 of the draft procedure bylaw. It specifies that members are entitled to speak up to 2 times for a combined maximum of 5 minutes, to ask questions directly relating to the matter under consideration, or to provide commentary, or to provide the member's position on a matter. And this is consistent with your current bylaw. Another important rule of debate is point of order. So members may raise a point of order if they believe that the rules of parliamentary procedure are being violated. And when this happens, the chair rules on the point of order, and members may appeal the chair's decision if they disagree. And we'll talk about that appeal later in the presentation. Section 13 of the new draft bylaw does deal with point of order. This section sets out the situations when a member can raise a point of order, such as when there's a deviation or departure from the rules as set out in the procedure bylaw, or a deviation from the matter under consideration, and the current discussion is not within the scope of the proposed motion. Also, section 13 clarifies that the process for making a point of order, it states that when there is a point of order, the chair shall interrupt the matter under consideration, ask the member raising the point of order to state the substance of and the basis for the point of order, and then rule on the point of order immediately without any debate by council. If a council member disagrees with the ruling of the chair, they may appeal that ruling to council. So if this happens, it's the council as a whole that will then decide whether to uphold or overturn the decision. This is done without debate and decided by majority vote. If there's no appeal, then the ruling of the chair is final. And so we just thought we'd give a sample scenario just to show how this can be used during a meeting. So a member of council may move a point of order if they see that a public member is speaking longer than their allotted time. There is no seconder in this case, and the chair rules on the point of order. If they determine that there's a breach of the rules, the chair can ask the public member to wrap up their comments or to thank the public member and advise that their time is up. And we understand that this might sound a bit heavy-handed, but it actually does the opposite. It just ensures that everyone is provided with the same opportunity, with the same time limits to speak to the matter. So really, it's all about fairness. Another important rule of debate is point of privilege. Point of privilege refers to something that is timely and urgent. It raises a question raised by another member that concerns health, safety, or integrity, and they interrupt the proceedings. And there are 2 kinds. Point of general privilege, which refers to everyone, and point of personal privilege that refers to one person. So we've aligned this matter of point of privilege within its own section, section 14, and it follows parliamentary procedure and municipal best practices. It's important to remember that when a member raises a point of privilege, then this shall take precedence over any other item. So when a point of privilege is raised, the chair will ask the member raising the point of privilege to state the substance of and the basis for the point of privilege. The chair will immediately then rule on the point of privilege. Again, if a member does not agree with the ruling, then they have the ability to appeal the ruling of the chair to council, and the council will decide by majority vote. So here's an example scenario. A member of council might raise a point of privilege if they feel they are being treated in a way which lacks the respect of another member. In this case, the member notes a point of personal privilege to the chair, and the chair must make a decision on the matter.
So the next main section of the new bylaw is titled Meetings, and it includes all of the items that are listed on this slide. And we will now take a look at the sections that have been changed or updated from the existing procedure bylaw. So the first section that I want to mention is section 15, and this one deals with the inaugural council meeting. This section has been updated consistent with municipal best practices to allow for some additional flexibility with regard to the scheduling of the inaugural council meeting. It allows for the inaugural meeting to be held sooner following the municipal election, and it does still stipulate that the inaugural meeting will generally be held in council chambers, but there is flexibility for that as well. The next section that I want to mention is with respect to of your meetings. Notice requirements for regular council and committee meetings are a key part of public engagement and facilitate local government openness, transparency, and accountability. You're going to hear us use those words lots today. Section 20 of the new draft bylaw provides consistency around when and where meeting notice information is posted and includes specifying the date, the time, and the place for council and committee meetings. Providing public notice of your meetings helps to inform the public of opportunities to participate in the decision-making and to share their views. And the draft bylaw also states that regular council meeting agendas will be posted on the municipal website on the Thursday preceding the scheduled meeting, which is the same as what you see in the current bylaw. Section 20.3 is a new section of the bylaw, and it has been added to clarify that new items of business will not be added to the council agenda after its publication. And this is a best practice, as adding new items of business really goes against the principle of transparency, as the public wouldn't necessarily be aware of any of these added items or have sufficient time to be able to review them and request a delegation if they had a concern with it. However, this section does also state that any correspondence item that has been submitted that is related to an item that's already on the council agenda, it would definitely be circulated to council members so that it can be considered when the original agenda item is discussed. And that's included in the addendum agenda. Another change that has been made from your current bylaw is in section 23, which deals with quorum. So based on municipal best practices and to respect all participants' time, we've reduced the maximum time to achieve quorum from your current 30 minutes to 15 minutes. So that means that a quorum of members must be present within 15 minutes after the time that the meeting was scheduled to begin. Otherwise, the clerk will record the names of the members that are present and the meeting is adjourned. And if quorum is lost during hybrid or electronic meeting, we've included some wording that would suggest that you should recess for 15 minutes in order to allow those that are joining electronically a chance to reconnect and therefore be able to regain quorum. However, if after 15 minutes that quorum still can't be achieved because you weren't able to be able to get that connection again, then that meeting too would be adjourned and any unfinished business would be carried forward to the next meeting. And in section 29, more detail has been included with respect to electronic participation that really mirrors your existing practices. It does include the addition of hybrid meeting within the definition section of the bylaw. And as well, this section states that members are required to notify the clerk 2 days in advance of any meeting in which they intend to participate electronically. And of course, we've made reference to Southgate's electronic participation policy, which provides additional guidance and detail for members that wish to participate electronically. Yes.
Just wondering about some of your thoughts on an item. There's a close by county that has a counselor who consistently connects to the meetings virtually. I can count on my hand the number of times this term that member has darkened the door of the council chambers. Any thoughts on whether that's appropriate or are the municipalities doing anything to encourage participation like in person as opposed to virtually, or limiting the amount of times? Because I recognize that the hybrid technology, you know, it's very beneficial in a lot of ways, but in other ways, maybe not so much. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, you stole my thunder.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. The very next thing I was going to say, what Michelle and I feel very strongly, and we want to mention that although joining meetings electronically, as you said, it's very convenient. And there are instances when a member might not otherwise be able to attend because they may be out of town.
Absolutely.
So absolutely, that option should be there. We strongly agree. However, having said that, we think that members should strive to be in person at meetings as much as possible. Over the years, we've found that individuals that are in person at meetings tend to be more engaged. It really helps also with team building because you get to see each other face to face. You have that ability to maybe read a little bit more body language and be able to understand a little bit more about where your colleagues are coming from when they're making discussions and debating. So we actually think that wherever possible, it is a best practice to be in person. In terms of your second question, are municipalities doing things about it? We are aware there are definitely municipalities that include stipulations in their procedure bylaws or their electronic participation policies that restrict how many meetings a member of council can participate electronically over the course of a year. And then there are others that don't have any of those parameters in. And it really, again, I'll go back to one of the first statements we said is that we think that for Southgate, well, you need to meet all the legislative requirements of your bylaw. You need to also adopt policies, procedures that fit with your needs, with your local needs. So if it was Southgate that was having an issue with that, then it should be something that Southgate Council should discuss and decide what would be appropriate. If it's happening in another municipality at the county level, then it really needs to be a discussion that takes place when those procedure bylaws are being reviewed there or those electronic participation policies. So we see it many different ways, from very tight restrictions to being wide open.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that you have to go to the procedural bylaw to kind of be like a referee with respect to that, but some municipalities have found that that's the only way to give the members incentive to actually participate in person.
So I guess if the follow-up question would be, what are the ways that some of those municipalities are encouraging or
Right.
incentivizing those members to attend?
Right,
And
so
are they legal? Like, can we hold, or can we restrict the number of meetings that they participate virtually?
some procedure bylaws do indicate it could be 1 or 2 times during a year, which kind of puts the onus back on the clerk then, and the clerk has to keep track of that. So I think that's probably the most extreme case that we've seen in bylaws is the number of times you can participate electronically.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Barb has a question.
So to that, a neighboring municipality has a member who participates virtually and he or she has been reelected, having had that practice. And circumstances change for individuals over the course of a term, which might make it more difficult for a person to participate in person. Just, employment, health reasons. So what flexibility, we would establish an electronic participation policy in which we would recommend certain things, but as I say, circumstances change for individuals. What
Right.
flexibility would be built
Yeah,
into something like
Yeah, I
that?
think you need to take a look at those different situations. There are people that can't participate in person because of some of the reasons you said, because of work or can it be health issues, that type of thing. But then there are, unfortunately, some members that don't participate in person when they can. Right, so it's just a matter of kind of flushing that out and like Michelle said, seeing what's best, for your municipality in terms of should there be parameters, put around that, and do you want to see everyone in person all the time? And but you need to allow for some flexibility, absolutely. But it's just those offenders. I think that's what the mayor had really been kind of looking at. It's kind of all the time, right? And unfortunately, we just don't think that that's a good practice. It should. I think as a member of council, I'm more engaged in a meeting when I'm at the meeting, rather than if I'm live streaming it. To be honest.
Thank you.
Okay, so section 32 of the new draft bylaw has been updated and the agenda format reorganized a little bit on best practices. So the new agenda format now includes the national anthem as per a previous notice of motion that was adopted by council. And we want to note that the agenda item that was previously referred to as member privilege has been renamed general announcements. We think that this better provides a description of this agenda item and will allow the public to better understand what will be presented during this portion of the meeting. And finally, in accordance with best practices, the reading of the bylaws has been moved to closer to the end of the agenda.
Question?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt
Yeah,
again.
no problem. No.
Two things. First, open forum. Are you a fan of that? Or whatever you want to call it, but are you a fan of open forum?
We are going to specifically talk about open forum later
Okay.
on in that, and we'll give you our opinions on that. Yes.
And the other is the order of various things, consent items. Should they be earlier in the meeting?
But usually we find consent items kind of where we're suggesting for Southgate's procedural bylaws. So could be like the middle or close to the end. Again, we're going to talk specifically about consent agenda items as well.
Okay.
But those are good
Okay.
questions. Yeah.
I'll stop.
No, it's all good.
Barb.
It's all good.
Also, I noticed that council highlights, county council highlights has been removed.
Mhm.
It was something that was encouraged in a previous term of council, something that we've continued, but not necessary.
Well, we don't think so, because in some other municipalities, we see that, you know, the minutes are included as part of the consent agenda package, for example, or as an email to members of council. If there's something specific that the county councilors want to talk about at that meeting, then they certainly can raise that, but we just don't feel like it's council meetings are to transact council business. And I think if that information is available to council to read, then there's no, we don't think there's any benefit to having those being read aloud.
Yeah, and that if there was something specific, as Michelle said, that the mayor, deputy mayor wants to be able to bring forward as a result of a county initiative, they could certainly do that under the general announcement section as well. We didn't feel that it was necessary to have it as its own separate agenda item.
I don't disagree. We don't currently receive minutes from county council.
We don't currently know. There's nothing to say that we can't start doing that in the absence of this, but as Michelle pointed out, the information's available on the website. It's,
Anyone can sign up.
yeah, for
And-
distribution.
And the
yeah.
video is there for anyone to watch, so it's even better than minutes.
Yeah, so, but again, this is Southgate's bylaw, so if you want to see a change in the order, to what we were recommending, then that's certainly your prerogative to take a look at that. Okay, so we note that this is a deviation from your current practice, but we are suggesting that on a go-forward basis, that you observe, the quorum during public meetings under the Planning Act, the same as you would during a committee of adjustment or regular council meeting. This is a best practice, which ensures that the public can address a majority of council members to express their support or opposition for a given application. Community input is a really critical aspect of the decision-making process, especially with planning meetings. So having a majority of the member of councils in attendance to hear from the public not only ensures better decision-making, but it also demonstrates respect and helps to build positive relationships and trust with the public. And we know in talking to the clerk's office that you normally do have quorum, but I think there might have been a couple of occasions where you don't, and we're suggesting that should absolutely be the case on a go-forward basis. Section 37 of the new draft bylaw provides updated language based on best practices with dealing with the consent agenda. So the consent agenda is a practical tool to streamline meetings by collecting and grouping routine, non-controversial topics into a single agenda item that can be passed with a single motion and vote. So this approach allows the council to focus on more significant issues while efficiently handling less contentious matters. So when consent agenda items come up during the meeting, there's no oral presentation or discussion of the items. Instead, it's understood that the information has been reviewed by council and before the meeting and will only be discussed if anyone has a question or wants to consider it separately. And Michelle and I want to mention that over the years, we have found that it's really interesting. Lots of times council members spend, and I'm included, we spend too much time on sometimes the more straightforward reports like to receive for information than we do on some of the more significant ones that are asking council to take action. So we think that the consent agenda can help with that. Section 37 also specifies the types of items that are typically included within a consent agenda, and it includes routine staff reports, reports that are submitted to council for information purposes only, minutes from previous meetings, and general correspondence that does not require any action. And by consolidating these items into a consent agenda, council can save time again and enhance efficiency of their meetings. And there's really no value added in having council engage in some of those discussions around those routine pieces of correspondence or reports.
Question.
Yes.
So to this slide specifically and to the procedural bylaw, I note that correspondence is being recommended in the bylaw to be removed from the consent agenda and circulated separately, or not included in the consent agenda, or in a response to one of my questions to the clerk.
Sure. So through you, Chair Milne, I think it's just going to be a different process. So there will still be correspondence if we're directed to put that on the agenda. So much like we did this a few years back with a council information package, all of the correspondence was put together and published as an agenda. We won't be doing that. Us internally will be sending out kind of like a weekly summary of this is what we have. And then you can respond and say, yep, I would like that item. So then it would be put onto the agenda. But right now it's kind of a free for all. We just add everything that we receive, and that's what we're trying to get away from for efficiency purposes. Maybe Michelle
Yeah.
could
I mean,
elaborate, but
yeah.
that's our, it is going to be something new for sure.
Yeah, that's how many municipalities do deal with it. I know that Thames Center does with that. Every week we get a list of correspondence items that's received by the clerk's office. We take a look at that and we decide which ones we want to kind of put on the council agenda. And then once we get to that council agenda, if we have any, things, if we want to lift it, talk about it separately or endorse the correspondence, then we can do that. Otherwise, it's part of the consent agenda that's received by council.
I'll let Barb have a follow-up.
So through you to our clerk, how much, I don't generally see a lot of correspondence. We get resolutions from other municipalities. We get very little correspondence, and sorry, just to
Yeah.
elaborate, in order for us to pull the item to have included on an agenda, when will this weekly package be circulated to us so that we have sufficient time to review the correspondence, and how transparent is that correspondence package to the public?
So through you, Chairman, generally, we're calling it correspondence. That would include resolutions of other municipalities. That's the most that we receive. But we also receive correspondence from agencies, the conservation authorities. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head.
Healthy Internet County.
Yeah, healthy, like, yeah, there's lots of correspondence that we receive. Most of it is resolutions. And we are gonna have to do a little bit of pondering back and forth of how exactly we'll run it internally. As you said, because we need enough time to get it on the agenda. I imagine that the kind of the week before's correspondence list, it'll have to be separated out that way, but yeah, it'll take some adjusting internally, but I think once we see it in practice, I can see you're not believing that it will work maybe, but
Yeah, sure.
And we'll have further debate about this, I'm
Oh, yeah.
certain.
yeah.
I guess I'm just doing the math that we'll need time to review the package to
Mhm.
determine. So now we're 2 or 3 weeks before a council meeting.
I think you're thinking it'll be a massive big package. It's not gonna be. We don't receive a huge amount of stuff, but
But also, if every municipality did this, then why would we circulate a resolution to all Ontario municipalities for
That's an excellent
consideration?
question.
Yeah, I was
That's
gonna
an
say.
If
excellent
it's
question.
not gonna hit,
Yeah,
if it's
we wanna
not
take
gonna
that
hit
out.
the agenda.
Well,
I'll say it now, and we'll have more debate
That's
further.
fine.
I'm gonna have a problem with it. I can tell.
I'm of two minds. But that's the reason, like, if you feel passionate about a resolution, you absolutely have the opportunity, right, to take it from the internal list and put it on the agenda and speak to it at a meeting. So you can do that. But I think 9 times out of 10, I always question, what does that mean when you're endorsing a resolution? Like, and it goes back to, the original municipality that moved it, or even to AMO. Like, I mean, you have more experience with that than myself in terms of how, AMO or another organization would take a look at that. But you have to wonder sometimes, what is the value in that? But again, if you feel something like passionately strong about, a resolution, you absolutely have the chance to do that. You just don't need to do that with everyone that you get. Right?
Jason, and then I see Joan has her hand up.
Maybe it's too specific, but just, I can't remember, like, I remember we used to do the check register. I found that interesting, or what do we call it?
yeah,
Oh,
the-
sure.
Was
the-
that under,
The GL, the
Yeah.
accounts payable listing, yeah.
I found it interesting. I don't know, is that something we can, or is that was just a question.
It is what
I
we
couldn't remember,
did
was that
phase it
consent
out.
or-
We did phase it out. I think it's a very much a dated practice, but maybe if you would.
I would say it's stated. However, but there should be internal like policies in terms of, quarterly financial updates that are brought to council that kind of help council understand what monies have been spent on different projects and that sort of thing.
Joan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what the deputy mayor was saying, because sometimes I do take out like staff report or resolution that I think that I have interest in to be circulated or whatnot. So I'm not too sure how we're going to do this when it comes back, or when am I going to see it to say to Lindsay or what, I want to take that out, or I want to speak to that. Not a lot of speaking on it, but just to support that resolution
Right.
or that report.
Yeah. So if I could just generally, so the clerk would provide an internal listing of correspondence items, like specifically like resolutions as you've indicated. And a member of council can always say, I want all of them, right? So I want all of them to go on to the agenda. That will go on the agenda. They'll be noticed. And then once it's on the agenda, members of council can have it lifted so that you can have a discussion about it, so that you can talk about the endorsement, whether you want to do that or not. So you still have the ability. All we're suggesting is you don't always have to have everything on the agenda, but maybe 9 times out of 10, maybe members of council will be putting all of that correspondence on the agenda, but it's your decision, still in your hands. It's still, you get to decide.
If I
Madam
might
Clerk,
add it,
yep.
it's gonna be it'll be what we do now, just in a different way, is how I'll put it.
And I do.
You're not
recall-
gonna miss anything, is what I'm gonna say.
I do recall the practice from the past, and it worked fine. As Michelle One said, counselors had the opportunity to notify the clerk to take that, whatever we had interest in, put it on the agenda, and the ability to pull it and speak to it or endorse it or whatever, give it direction. And it worked fine. I rue the day we changed that, but anyway, here we are. So I'll take direction from council. Any other questions on that? Martin, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback on what both Joan and Barb said about, we've seen 3 or 4 different resolutions from different townships all dealing with the same thing. And to the point where, well, why are we bothering to do that if you're gonna just pick one of those and give it to us because it says the same thing? There's no,
Yeah, and if I may, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. Like just this week alone, I think I've received over 20 about the strong mayor powers, like in our current practice. I mean, I don't do it, but our current practice, I would add them all, and it's just not necessary. It's bogging down our agendas, and I think this is a better process.
Barb.
We'll get to strong mayor power.
Yeah.
But isn't this more work for your office? Because now you've got to create a package to go out to council. You have to wait for them to request them to be added to the agenda. So there could be a 10-day delay of correspondence. I'm going to assume you're going to include minutes from the Conservation Authority or Grand River Conservation Authority or the Police Services Board, things that are of importance to the public that they may not see unless we get on it and in a timely way. So I see this as more work for the clerk's office, because now you have to receive more mail, receive more emails, requests, then add it. I'll see how it works. I'll try to keep an open mind and not pull them all and be one of those counselors that say, add them all. But it from an AMO's perspective, as a representative on the AMO board, there's value in multiple voices saying the same thing to the province or the federal government to advocate for better funding, for better safety. And it's those circulation of those resolutions that help to get the public involved and make them aware, and that they have a voice as well. They can go online and they can send their representative correspondence as well. So I'll try to keep an open mind.
Madam Clerk, did you have a response or you're good?
I think I'll leave it at that for now.
All right,
Again, it's.
can I invoke
it's your
closure?
bylaw. Okay, we're gonna move
Oh,
on.
Jim has
to-
our CEO has
Oh,
a,
sorry.
Jim?
Yeah, good afternoon, good people. I think if staff sees some correspondence come in, it's a burning hot topic or something that needs to be publicized, it's not going to hit your list. It's going to get on the list immediately. So there will be some screening available. That's how I see it.
Thanks, Jim.
Good point.
Okay,
Okay, we are gonna move on to notices of motion now. So most municipalities require members of council to proceed any new main motion with a notice of motion so that members can consider it before debate begins. So best practices suggest that procedure bylaws should include the rules about introducing a notice of motion, address how and when staff reports will be requested, the timelines for giving notice, and indicate that a 2/3 vote is required to introduce a notice of motion at the same meeting, and that all submissions should be in written form. So consistent with those best practices, section 36 of your new draft bylaw outlines a process for members of Southgate Council to submit a notice of motion. So first, members must submit the notice of motion in writing to the clerk. If the proposed motion is submitted to the clerk in time to be included on a regular agenda package that will meet the notice requirements, and the member of council shall then be able to introduce and move the motion at that meeting. If the motion is submitted at the meeting, instead of giving it to the clerk to be included in a council agenda, then it will simply be received without comment or debate, and then the clerk will add it to the next regular council agenda for the purpose of giving notice. No staff report will be prepared in advance. And we also want to point out that while not recommended, if there's a critical deadline, council can always suspend the rules of procedure to allow the notice of motion to be introduced and debated at the same meeting with a 2/3 vote. So here's an example. Councillor Smith gave notice of their intention to propose a motion to have staff provide a report on a green fleet plan for municipal vehicles. So in considering the best practices for this notice of motion, we believe, and I do even as the deputy mayor for Thames Center, if I'm going to put a notice of motion forward at a council meeting, I want to make sure that I've discussed the notice of motion with staff for a couple of reasons. Wordsmithing for sure, because sometimes I might not always get it right. And it could be a matter really that maybe staff's already working on, right? So if they're already working on it, they're going to bring a report, then I don't need to bring forward that notice of motion. So I always want to make sure that we're setting each other up for success. I want to make sure if I'm bringing forward a notice of motion, that staff's behind it and they can implement it. And then, you also need to take a look at, do you need to resource it out, or can staff do it internally? Is it something that you need to get a consultant for? Do you have the finances to move ahead with that? Does it align with the strategic plan? So there's a lot of things that you really should kind of consider before landing a notice of motion on the council floor. And then, as I mentioned, the previous member privilege section of the agenda has been renamed to general announcements. And section 38 of the procedure bylaw has been added to clarify that the general announcements portion of the council meeting is an opportunity for council members to make announcements, recognize achievements, promote events, or recognize matters of community-wide interest. This section also clarifies that general announcements should not be used for general discussions, to ask questions or to provide direction to staff, to discuss agenda items, to discuss municipal business, whether it's past business, present business, or future business, to discuss prior council decisions, to make private or personal announcements, to discuss staff performance, or for individual members to advance personal views or opinions, or to promote personal websites, chats, groups, or discussions. And these announcements are typically not related to directing municipal business. So therefore, the details of the announcements will not be included in the formal part of the minutes. Michelle.
Okay, so the next section of the draft procedure bylaw spells out how the public can participate and be engaged in your meetings, and it addresses presentations, delegations, correspondence, and open forum. So hopefully we can answer some of those questions you had before.
Barb.
Before we move out of the agenda structure, question, where, and I think we've asked this before, from time to time, where do we ask staff for a status of, where are we on the national anthem? I mean, we could certainly do that offline, which is a best practice, but is there an opportunity to speak or have an update on a resolution we passed 2 months ago, and we're just wondering where it is at? Or that's just an example. I can't think of the other one.
Yes. I'm just gonna ask staff, do you guys circulate a sheet that talks about staff projects or resolutions that you're working on? Okay.
Jim?
But we do have our leadership team meetings and notes and minutes from there and work plans. So that's an internal process, if that relates to it.
Yeah.
So we've seen some municipalities that when there are, say, a notice of motion that was approved, referred to staff for a report, and the report's going to take a little bit of research, so it's not coming back necessarily at the next meeting. So we have seen municipalities that have essentially a council resolution tracking sheet that, I mean, and that maybe isn't the exact terminology that's used, but it's something that is twofold purposes. One, allows council to have, to know the status of it, where it is in the process, since you've asked for those types of reports. And second, what I found in my previous experience is it also helps to keep the senior leadership team, it reminds them of things that may have, because they had multiple priorities going on and something new might come up that is taking precedence, not to necessarily lose track of some of those things that maybe aren't a huge priority today, but you still need to make sure that they're followed up on. And Michelle, I don't know if you've got another suggestion, but I've found in the past that sometimes help, and it doesn't form part of your council agenda. What it is it's something that's sent out periodically, whether it be once a month or once every couple months. It just allows council an update on what those particular matters are and what status they are.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all I can think of. I know that there used to be on agendas, unfinished business, that type of thing, right? That you kind of bring it forward, but we're not seeing that contained on agendas too much anymore.
I know years ago, another council had what they called an action list and who was responsible and what the topic was. But after a few months, the list started going like this, and it was counterproductive. So anyway, Madam Clerk.
I think I'll add, so we internally, we do our action items following meetings, and we have our resolution listing, but I think what the deputy mayor is meaning is more of an update on where something's at. So I don't think those lists would be helpful, but Jim and I are both making notes, so we can speak internally about something along those lines that we could maybe start doing to help you just know where things are at, or at least the bigger things maybe.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Do we need those?
No.
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment.
Yes.
Okay, so the first section that I want to talk about under the public participation slide is section 41. And this provides guidance for when presentations are being made to council. So each presentation is going to still be limited to 10 minutes to ensure efficiency and respect for everyone's time. However, I want to point out there is a section or clause in that section that does allow the presenter, if they believe that the topic is going to require more time, they can seek an extension from the chair in advance. The clerk is going to be responsible for communicating these requirements to each presenter so they understand what the rules are going to be. As well, the clerk will be managing the number of presentations that are going to be made at any given meeting. This is consistent with your current practice. So generally, there will be only one presentation permitted during evening meetings and two presentations during daytime meetings. And any outside organization or individual that wishes to make a presentation to council is still going to be required to submit a request form. And they also need to make sure that they're submitting to the clerk any relevant presentation materials in advance so that they can be included in your agenda package that goes out to you. So ideally, there shouldn't be any presenters that are coming, save and except Michelle and I, that you haven't necessarily seen the presentation before we actually come in and do this. Exactly, for more than 10 minutes, correct. Additionally, section 41 also states that any specific action requests that pertain to operational matters, that they will be directed to the appropriate staff or department for further review. So this means no decisions on those types of presentations will be made during the meeting itself when the presentation is received. And this approach really allows there to be a more thorough evaluation of the request before any final decision is made by council, to make sure you have all of the information necessary before making a decision on the presentation. So section 42, oops, I clicked twice, I apologize.
Oh, question.
No, please.
With regard to presentations, not making a decision. So I will use our last meeting as an example where we had a delegation requesting funding. Later on, there was a staff report because when they inquired, they were directed to the right department. If they hadn't been a staff report, and it was the favor of council to support the request for armbands, could that, you're saying that no decision will be made, but could it be made?
Yeah, we're going to get to a section later on in the agenda that talks about suspending your rules. So a procedure bylaw has rules of procedure that council is expected to follow, but there's also a clause in there that speaks to certain situations you may want to consider not following your rules because of a specific situation. And we can talk about that a little bit more. But generally speaking, the situation you're referring to, if there's a request coming to council for financial assistance, one, if it's urgent and timely, you can suspend your rules and you can deal with it. But as a matter of course, you want to make sure before you decide to approve that one, the request, you've got enough money in the budget to do so. So you're going to need your treasurer to weigh in on it. You're going to want to see whether it circumvents any other policy or procedure that might be in place, what type of resourcing, all of those types of things. So that's why we suggest if it's an operational matter, then it needs to go back to staff for them to be able to report back to you on what operational implications there will be before you make that decision. We've seen in the past, unfortunately, there are some councils that say, hey, that's a great idea. We love that. And they say, yeah, we're going to approve that. And then after the meeting or at the next meeting, staff comes back a report and here's this list of all the reasons why you shouldn't have made that decision. So it's actually in everyone's best interest to make sure you've got all of the information that's relevant. So the reason for the referral back to staff.
Thank you.
Oops, sorry. So the next one is with respect to delegations. So in this case, a delegation is an item is going to relate to an agenda item that's already on your agenda. So a presentation is something that's going to be contemplated before and it becomes part of the agenda, but your delegations are people that wish to speak about something that's already on your printed agenda. So anyone wishing to appear before council needs to register as a delegation by submitting again the prescribed form and any accompanying materials to the clerk by no later than noon, one business day prior to the meeting. And then delegations will be limited to 10 minutes each. However, council does have the ability to be able to extend that time limit by a majority vote. And members of council are permitted to ask delegates questions only for clarification or to obtain additional information, not to necessarily be making decisions because you have an item later on in your agenda that you're going to be making the decision on. So there really shouldn't be any other dialogue other than if there's something you're not sure about and you just need that clarification. So the next part of public participation is related to correspondence. So this recognizes that, again, the process that we talked about a little bit earlier in the presentation. So the clerk will be required to prepare a council information package weekly, and it would meet with your council correspondence policy that you have in place right now. And if a member of council, of course, wishes council to formally consider that piece of correspondence, they can request the clerk to include that item in the next agenda package. And we've kind of run through this already. And this is another one of those situations where if required due to a specific urgency, timing, a deadline for something that's happening, and subject to the discretion of the mayor in consultation with the clerk, that piece of correspondence can be placed directly on an addendum agenda as an additional item. We don't necessarily recommend additional items to go on your council agenda, but if there's an emergent issue, then absolutely you need to have that flexibility. And the last bullet point on this slide is a new clause that we've added to the bylaw to clarify that council's receipt of any piece of correspondence does not necessarily constitute endorsement by the municipality or any of the recommendations that the correspondence may contain or any actions that it may advocate for. And the last piece of public participation section deals with open forum. So not all municipalities in Ontario have open forum in their council meetings, but recognizing that it is your practice to do so, we've included this provision as section 44 of the draft bylaw. And I'll answer your question at the end, Your Worship. So there are no changes proposed for the open forum requirements, but we do want to note that no motions, decisions, or comments should be made by council in response to any of the comments that are made during open forum. And we also want to, and this is probably going to be a hint towards where our opinion is, but we also want to suggest to council that the purpose of formal council meetings really is, as Michelle mentioned earlier, to transact municipal business. It's not necessarily intended to be a platform for general or informal discussions with residents. Having said that, we think that there are some really effective ways for council to obtain input from your constituents rather than just through open forum. So things like one-on-one meetings, email communications, telephone calls, social media, they all serve to inform council of constituent issues or concerns. As well, many municipalities are now using town hall meetings, regular town hall meetings, as well as public information centers when there's a major project to gather input from their residents. Some also have used outside companies to engage with their residents to collect feedback on a specific important issue that they think should be dealt with at arm's length. So these are just some other ideas that we think you might want to consider going forward rather than utilizing open forum as kind of the primary vehicle for you to receive input from your residents. So we're not suggesting you shouldn't have it, but we're suggesting we think there's a lot of other good ways that you can get probably more valuable information or dialogue, because having a maximum of 3 minutes for a presentation to council, sometimes you can't really get into the meat of it. We're having some more informal discussions, particularly at town hall meetings. Thames Centre that Michelle's deputy mayor of, and I won't jump into your thunder, but they do that regularly. All of their ward councillors, they hold town hall meetings on a number of different things, probably 8 or 10 throughout the year. And they've been really well received, and the public seems to have a much better feel for engaging with their council members in those forums.
Without
those-
advancing the business.
Yes, without advancing the
Are those
business.
open, are those town halls, are they in person or are they online?
No, in person.
The reason why the open forum piece concerns me, and I remember talking to a municipal lawyer years ago, and he just couldn't believe that we actually had open forum. He said, consider the situation. Someone comes to the microphone in a council meeting and says, is it true that so-and-so staff member has been caught with their hand in the cookie jar? It just blows up, right? Now you're in a position where you have to defend yourself from something that's has no basis in truth, hopefully. Those kind of situations is just, yeah, it doesn't end well.
Yeah, it's difficult. It puts council, I think, in a difficult position because if you can't, if the purpose of open forum is to hear the constituent without you yourself being able to either comment or ask a question back, it's just, you're just getting it one way. It's not like the two-way
Right.
kind of engagement that should happen, but outside of a council meeting.
Yeah, I like the idea of the town hall. So Barb, go ahead.
And through you, yeah, I mean, it's a sunny day. No, it's raining. That kind of situation, and there are avenues to address those types of accusations. But I think up until now, up until this procedural bylaw, the residents, the constituents, the taxpayer hasn't had an opportunity other than to direct email, to phone, to have their voice heard on an agenda item. The agenda is released on Thursday, we meet on Wednesday, and it's too late to get a delegation because the deadline is noon Wednesday before the agenda is published. So up until now, there's never been that opportunity for someone to register as a delegate on an agenda specific by noon on the Monday prior to. So this may alleviate some of the open forum issues as people become more aware of that opportunity. I guess 2 delegations versus open forum, we have a limit on the number of delegations that can be added to an agenda. So we limit delegations and presentations to 2.
No, actually, through you, Mr. Chair. No, what this new bylaw says is presentations are going to be limited, but delegations that relate to agenda items, we believe that that's unfair to say that you can only have 2 people if you've got 3 people and there's 3 important agenda items and they all want to speak on something different. So delegations are going to be handled differently than.
Madam Clerk.
Yeah, and through you, Mayor Milne, I think it'll be a new process because before, and maybe it was an error by staff, we kind of used delegations and presentations interchangeably, where this is going to set up the precedence that most people coming to speak to request something or whatever, what have you, it'll be a presentation, and the delegations will just be for agenda items. So it is new. So we'll try to figure out a way to somehow put that out there so people understand that. But yeah, I think in the past we've used them as one and the same, and where we probably shouldn't have been, but it's definitely more clear in this new bylaw.
And I think through you, Mayor Milne, that it's excellent. This is definitely a step forward to engaging the public and allowing them an opportunity to speak to an item. Thank you.
And we feel sorry through you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
And we feel very strongly about that as well. We think, and what our experience has been with a number of municipalities, that as people get familiar with it's a delegation I want to be, I think that you may see fewer individuals requesting open forum, and it may be a situation where at some point down the road you can say, you know what, we're not really using that anyways. Let's just remove that process because there are some potential issues. We haven't run into them, thankfully, but there are some potential issues. And so maybe we just need to focus on those 2 avenues as opposed to 3.
Very good. Yeah, thank you. Jason, and then I see Monica has her hand up. Go ahead, Jason.
Back to the town hall thing. I've been talking about that for a few years. I think it's a great idea. So is that something where we should have a town hall for a specific, something specific coming up, or do you just have it for just to meet with the public? And because I really like that idea, and
Yeah.
some don't. So.
Yeah, so if we have a specific project that we're gonna undertake, then we do like an information center, so but that's specific to that project. But a town hall is basically, you're dropping in, you're not meeting with all of council, like, so we split it into different wards. So there's primarily speaking with the ward councillor about some of the initiatives or concerns that they might have. So it's more engagement, it's more kind of one-on-one, right? And discussing those issues directly.
So, yeah, we don't have a ward here, but so would it be, could a counselor or a couple counselors just put that on, or does that have to be?
Well, we think so.
Yeah, I know, I often wondered that.
As a clerk, a former clerk, I mean, you want to make sure that you're not advancing the business. You're not going to tell
Right.
residents, yes, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. So it's just a matter of having that dialogue with the residents. You're right, it doesn't have to be with the ward, but it can be in a specific area of the municipality. and invite people out that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Monica, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much. Just through you, Chair, to the speakers, just to this person who was just speaking right now, really appreciate your comments, and if it was possible to speak a little bit in the mic, if it's not already happening, if there can be an adjustment, because I'm finding this to be a very, very important meeting. I'm very thankful, and I wish it was sooner than later that we had this, especially in the beginning of this term. So with that in mind, with regards to the open forum, is the way to understand this, would it be that open forum for residents would be similar to general announcements or members' privilege previously for council? Is that the way to kind of look at this?
Michelle?
No, no, so open forum is specific, and I hope you can hear me better now. I've changed the location of my microphone. Open is specific for people like residents coming and speaking with council, whereas the general announcement section is for members of council to speak to their items.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, because I just wanted to have a better understanding. I'm sure that we'll be having a time to ask questions, and I do apologize not being on camera because I'm not feeling too well the best today. It's just that I found that, for example, if someone on council makes an announcement or speaks to someone, another council member's matters or anything that's going on with them without their permission, and they do it like live and kind of puts others on the spot, I find that to be concerning, whether it's a good thing or not a good thing or whatever it is. So that was where I was thinking about that line of thinking with open forum, and then during members' privilege or general announcements, that there should be some protocol to gain permission from another council if you're going to be making any type of announcements, because sometimes, you know, things don't need to be discussed or need to get proper permission to see if that can even be discussed at a council meeting, trying to keep things, you know, transparent and separate. So that was my question with regards to procedural bylaw, if that's something that can also be created, that if someone's going to be speaking to someone else, that they should be gaining permission to do that just out of decorum, which I love that word. And I hope that that's something that can be practiced more. So I'm not sure if this is the right moment to ask that, but that was where my line of thinking was.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Do you want to, Michelle, please?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So under the general announcement section, one of the things that we've said is that, yeah, it's the purpose to make announcements to let your community know about things that are important to the community itself. And we've specifically indicated in that section that the purpose of general announcements is not to be used for, and then there are a number of things, which I think within that list of items that general announcement section shouldn't be used for, I think it would address your concern. And it does mention about making private or personal announcements or things like that. So I think that there is provision within the bylaw to be able to address your concern. Certainly, it's a little bit of a new approach, so it might take some time to be able to get fully up to speed on it, but I think it is in there.
Thank you, Michelle, very much for that. I will be following up on that because without getting too specific, whether it's someone's birthday, someone's having a grandchild, someone got a new job, whatever it is, I think that the proper way of doing things is to, for example, I contact Councillor Rice and I say, hey, Councillor Rice, I heard this is going on. First, can we announce this about the great things going on in your life? And then there might be parameters where that's not appropriate, even if it's good intended, or sometimes whatever other reason. So I think that's something that's very important, that's practiced on council, that we ask permission first, because others have to find out if it's allowed or not to begin with. And it kind of puts the person on the spot. And that's something that I'm very, very happy that these are being discussed right now. And I'll digress now for the moment, but I'm definitely making a lot of notes about a lot of things, and we'll be following up on many things. So thank you again.
Thank you, Monica. Barb.
So through you to, with regard to the town halls that City of Thames holds, by ward. And we don't have a ward system, so how do we distinguish who attends? It would be open to all members because we're elected at large. In the case of an individual counselor holding a town hall, because you just said that one or two or all could hold a town, who pays for it?
Well, we normally have it at a facility, a township facility or municipal facility, so there's really no expense. We're not offering refreshments or food or anything else. And even though it's a specific ward counselor that's holding the town hall, it doesn't mean that any residents from another ward, they can still come out and attend as well. So again, it doesn't need to be ward based. I mean, you could do it in just different geographic, right, areas within the municipality, but or just have, you know, one big one, but again, you just want to limit the number of council members that are attending because you don't want it to appear as if it's a council meeting where you're advancing business. It's just really tricky.
Go ahead, Barb.
So as an example, a neighboring municipality holds town halls. They do not have a ward system. Their council members show up and the residents, to Councillor Rice's favor, have an opportunity to ask questions about specific projects, specific issues. The business isn't advanced, but they take it under advisement. There's staff there. And would, in your situation, a ward councillor holding a town hall during an election campaign could be considered campaigning on the expense of a township facility? I'm very sensitive and conscious of that, keeping that separate. So I guess I'm all in favor. I agree that we should have more town halls where we have people have the opportunity to come in a less formal environment, and it's more like an open forum, but an open town hall. But I do have concerns about, you know, myself holding a town hall, in a township facility where what am I advancing? Like, I can do that by phone. I can do that as a coffee chat.
Yeah, absolutely. We just offered that as a suggestion to take a look at, and I would not advocate that you do that during a campaign period for sure. Right? You want to stay away from the election cycle. Yeah.
Okay, Jim had his hand up and then Jason.
Yeah, just wondering then, how do you, what staffing's required? Do you have all department heads there? Like the questions could come out of the blue of.
Yeah, ideally, we like to have as many as we can. We do understand, you know, they have a life and there's time constraints. So we try to rotate them around. Sometimes we know in one word, there's going to be, you know, hot button topic that we need to have a certain staff member there. We try to anticipate the questions that we'll have.
And who is the ultimate chair of the meeting? Who controls the meeting? Because I hear some of these town halls kind of get out of character a little bit because of some goings on. So who's in control of the meeting?
So we haven't had that situation, thankfully. But it really is up to the member of council. It's their meeting. But of course, staff is there to assist as well.
Okay, Jim, you're good? Jason.
So, going back to that, I get when you have more than 3 counselors there, or whatever. How is it I never understood that. How is it advancing it, just listening to the public when you're not voting on nothing? That was always to me, it's kind of a gray area. You're not making any decisions. Like, we're not at the council meeting or council table. So I don't understand how it's advancing it, because
I think it's a perceived advancement, to be honest. So I know you're not voting, but if you have 3 or 4 or the majority of members of council say, yeah, you know, that's a really good idea. You know, we're going to, you know, do something about that. Like, that's not the time and the place to do that. Really the purpose of the town hall is just to do that engagement, understand the concerns, answer questions, but you're not going to formally say, yeah, that's a great idea. At the next council meeting, you know, we're going to. I mean, you might do that, but you're not going to say you're going to do that. So it's more of the perceived advancement of that business.
Okay, I'm gonna suggest we've been at this for an hour and a half. Do we want to recess or? I'm seeing a few nods of heads.
Actually,
Yes.
we've got to. If this is
I
a good
agree.
time. Because we get into motions next, so.
Oh, goody,
The
goody.
exciting part.
It's always a, all right, so let's recess for 5 minutes. We'll come back at 1:45.
So the next section is motions. So we're going to discuss motions generally, just as a bit of a refresher. And then we will talk about the details of the specific motions in the draft bylaw. So again, some of this might seem really basic to you that are more experienced members of council, but we've structured the presentation in such a way that it ensures everyone has the same level of understanding of motions, and it's a good review for everyone. So what is a motion? It's a proposal by a member that a group takes certain action. All motions start with the phrase "I move." So instead of saying, "Oh, I think we should do this," which you might do during an informal meeting, formal motions need to be presented by saying "I move." And what do we mean when we say seconding a motion? A second in parliamentary procedure is short for second person. So another person, in addition to the first that just spoke up to make the motion. The second doesn't necessarily imply agreement with the content of the motion that was just proposed, but it does indicate agreement that the motion warrants the group's time to consider it. Conversely, no second means no go. So the motion is dead if after a few moments, no member agrees to second the motion. But if there is a second, the motion will the motion process will continue to the discussion and to eventually the vote. There are some exceptions though. Motions made in some committees typically do not require a second, and that's because the committee has been formed specifically for that purpose. So there's no need to confirm everyone's willingness to proceed on that particular issue. So seconds are important. To say a second only takes a second, but it communicates quickly and powerfully that at least two members think that the idea is worth considering. So there are 6 steps in making a motion. So first, a member makes the motion. Secondly, another member seconds the motion. Third, the chair states the question. Fourth, the members debate the motion. Fifth, the chair puts the question to a vote. And finally, number 6, the chair announces the result of the vote. And I know that you're probably thinking this is like really straightforward, but I'm not sure that all members of council always understand the steps necessary to make a motion. During my short time on council, I've experienced situations. It's not as if someone's meaning to skip steps, but sometimes that's what happens. And that it's frustrating for a member of council who's done the homework, who wants to speak to a certain item. And if the vote's already been taken before I had the chance to do that, then I obviously can't speak to the motion after that happens.
This is a quick one. In the, it explains that the chair must remove himself or herself from the chair in order to move a motion, but can they second a motion can they second a motion from the chair?
We say yes, yeah. Okay, so some of the basic rules for using motions in Robert's Rules of Order are negative motions. Really, they're not permitted. So you can't say, I think we should not do this, or I move that we don't. But you always want to make sure that you word your motions in the positive. Only one person should speak at one time. You cannot raise a new motion until all other motions are settled or adjourned. Only one motion must be discussed at one time. And all members have equal rights to be heard when discussing a motion. So there are key points that you follow with each motion. So the maker of the motion is entitled to speak first. A member must obtain the floor by being recognized by the chair. No member is entitled to speak a second time while any other member wishes to make a first speech. A speaker may not speak against the motion that they have made, but they can vote against it. And remarks must be confined to the merits of the pending question. So here's some more key points to follow with each motion. All remarks should be addressed through the chair. Members may not speak directly to one another, and we know that this happens quite often during meetings. When the chair announces the vote, they advise which side has it and the effect of the vote, and then moves on to the next item of business. So how do you draft a motion? So once there's an understanding of the kind of motion needed, you should try to write it out before the meeting if you can. And again, make sure to seek out the professional advice of your staff. Staff are usually the subject matter experts, and they are really there to help you. And remember that all of the business of council is completed through a properly worded motion. So writing a motion isn't difficult, but it does take some forethought. If you are drafting a motion that's related to a staff report, for example, then you want to make sure that your motion is very specific. So you want to be clear, concise. You want to anticipate some of the questions or concerns that you might get from other members of council. Does it require specific action to be taken? You want to understand why the motion is necessary. Are there any legal factors that should be considered? Or is there a deadline? And what type of funding may be required? So let's take a look at an example. So a poorly written motion would be, I move to redo the kitchen at the community center. Whereas a better written motion would be, I move that all of the kitchen appliances be replaced in the first phase of the community center renovations scheduled to commence in September 2025. And that the replacement costs be financed using $60,000 from the capital reserves. So this motion includes the key ingredients. It tells us exactly what will be replaced, when, and how it will be funded.
So Michelle's outlined the steps in making a motion and how to draft motions. So now let's talk about the different types of motions and how to process them. And as a former clerk, I think this is the most exciting part of the presentation, but some others might not agree. So there are many different types of motions, and you're not going to find that you use them regularly during your council deliberations. However, Michelle and I really do believe that understanding when and how to use each type of motion is critical to council success. So let's begin with what we think are the 3 must-know motions. We consider these to be the most important for council members to learn, as they're the ones that are used most in any of the meetings that we've been involved with. So they are, as on the slide, main motion, amendment, and amend the amendment. So what is a main motion? It's a basic form of motion whose introduction brings business before the council. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And it's the most important form of motion, the one that's used most frequently. So to make a main motion, you would begin by saying, I move that, and then you would carry on with your thought. So for example, let's say that a council member wants to propose a new water fountain be installed in the community park. That main motion would simply be, I move that the municipality install a new water fountain in the community park. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Then let's talk about the next of our 3 must-know motions. So that's amendment. So an amendment is a motion to modify the wording of a pending main motion. Essentially, it's a proposal to change the proposed action that's being considered by council at that moment. And an amendment should only be used to tweak the main motion, not completely rewrite it. And we've seen sometimes that there's a tendency to want to do that. And all amendments need to be germane, so they need to relate to the actual subject matter of the main motion. They can't bring up a new item or a new topic. Amendments can be made anytime during debate, provided that the main motion has been properly moved and seconded. So how do you amend or modify a motion? There's three ways essentially that you can do it. You can insert something within the motion or to the end of the motion. You can strike out words or even a whole paragraph, or you can strike out and insert or substitute words or a paragraph. So now let's look at what amendment would be. So to start, you would say, I move to amend the main motion by, and again, carrying on with our example motion about installing a water fountain in the community park, let's say that maybe another council member wants to change that motion to specify that the water fountain also include a bottle filling station. So in this case, the amendment would be, I move to amend the main motion to add, that's one of the options to be able to amend a motion, to add the words, including a bottle filling station after the words water fountain. So this amendment then would modify the original main motion by adding a specific feature to the water fountain. Then, if we go on to the next must-know motion of amend the amendment, this is where it gets a little trickier. So it is a motion that modifies the wording of the actual amendment, and it's often called a secondary amendment. Again, it needs to relate to the subject matter. And while amending the amendment, we don't find is all that common in lots of municipalities, it does come up on occasion. So we think you need to know how to deal with it. So let's look at it again. So you would begin by saying, I move to amend the amendment by, and then if we're going to carry on with the example motion, let's say that another council member wants to change the amendment, which was the bottle filling station, to now be, they want to add the words touchless in front of the bottle filling station. So they would say, I move to amend the amendment to add the word touchless before the before the words bottle filling station. So again, this secondary amendment refines that first amendment by adding that health conscious feature to the bottle filling station. So these steps might seem a little bit confusing if you haven't had a lot of experience making and amending motions, but I can assure you that once you get using them more frequently and you use that process, you'll become much more comfortable. So just a quick recap before we move on. The main motion focuses the council on one specific item of business. The amendment is the motion that allows you to add or subtract something to that main motion. And when you amend the amendment, you're again adding something to or subtracting something from. But this time, whoops, only for the amendment. That's what happens when I get gestures. Sorry. Yes. Back. Yep. Okay. My pyramid of precedence came up. Okay, so the next thing that we want to talk about is that every motion has a precedence, an order of precedence, and we usually see it illustrated as a pyramid of precedence. There are, of course, lots more types of motions in Robert's Rules of Order, but for right now, let's just look at the pyramid using our 3 must-know motions. So the main motion is the lowest ranking motion. It's shown at the bottom of the pyramid on the screen. Next in rank is the amendment, and then followed by amend the amendment. And the pyramid of precedence means that you make the motions moving up the pyramid and you vote on those motions moving down the pyramid. And this might seem a little bit confusing when it's just looking here. So we've got another way to be able to show you using pictures. And we're going to use the example motions again that I had talked about. So the main motion, which is at the bottom of the pyramid, is about installing the new fountain in the community park. So that's the main motion. Then the amendment was to add, including a bottle filling station. That's the second item moving up the pyramid. And then the amendment was to add the word touchless to the amendment, which was the bottle filling station. So this shows the order of precedence when you're making the motions. So you start at the bottom and you continue moving up. Then when you vote, you actually move down the pyramid. So when you're going to vote on that series of motions, you would start with voting on the secondary amendment, which was the adding the word touchless first. And then you see whether or not council agrees with that one or not. And then once that is decided, then you would go to the original amendment, which was including the bottle filling station. And then once that is voted on and decided upon, you would move down to the main motion. And if both of those amendments had been approved, your final motion that council would be voting on would be to, add a new water fountain in the community park that would include a touchless bottle filling station. Okay, is that a little bit clearer now when you kind of see it in that order? So we wanted to review this order of precedence with you in a bit more detail because over the years, Michelle and I have found that often councils don't always follow this order of precedence when they're making and voting on motions. And it can not only cause confusion for staff and the council members themselves to make sure that we understand what we're voting on at any one given point in time, but it also can be really confusing for your public that might be watching your deliberations. And while it may appear that there's a lot of steps in going through that, once you actually use the proper parliamentary procedure, we actually think that your meetings become easier to follow and easier to be able to run on a smoother basis.
Secondary must amend the original amendment.
Correct.
Secondary amendment to add the purple water. It would have to relate directly to the amendment of the bottle filling station.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Now it might be the bottle filling station have issue purple water, but I mean, yeah, you can't say that it would be that the new water fountain also be made of concrete, because that's a separate amendment which these ones would have to be dealt with first, and then you could move it as a separate amendment. Another amendment, yes. And actually, the number of amendments, like you've just said, in terms of making it concrete or making it blue or make it purple, the number of amendments, really, there is no limit to them. It's the tolerance and the patience of the group in fine tuning and refining that particular motion. Okay.
I don't want to repeat all that.
So, and while we're talking about amendments, Michelle and I have seen many councils that routinely use friendly amendments. And the term friendly amendment, for those that aren't familiar, is often used to describe an amendment that's offered by someone who's in support of the main motion and believes that the amendment will either improve the main motion or increase the chances of the main motion being adopted. And the intention really is to avoid moving a formal amendment, like I just talked about, that requires a seconder, debate, and ultimately a vote, and perhaps maybe saving some time. And while Robert's Rules of Order does not permit friendly amendments, Southgate's procedure bylaw currently does allow for them.
We're friendly.
So with that in mind, what's the best way to deal with them? So during debate, before the chair calls a vote on a motion, someone may ask the mover of a motion, would they agree to a small change in wording? Presumably, it's both uncontroversial and supportive of the motion, thereby being friendly, and is likely to be acceptable to the mover. So the mover then can either accept or reject the proposed wording change. And if the mover of the motion rejects the change, then the member who was suggesting it in the first place can then formally make an amendment, and council would deal with it in the proper amendment process. But if the change is accepted by the mover, then the changed motion with that friendly amendment in it would then be debated and the vote would be called on it. So the key thing to remember is that friendly amendments really need to be uncontroversial and need to be supportive of the main motion. And they really need to be minor in nature and not change the overall intent of the motion. So we've got an example here for you. So let's say at a council meeting, Councillor Smith makes the following motion: that the council provide financial sponsorship in the amount of $1,000 to the local Christmas parade being held in December 2024. And Councillor Jones realizes immediately that Councillor Smith meant to say December 2025, not 2024. So Councillor Jones proposes a friendly amendment to change 2024 to 2025. So this amendment is indeed friendly because it makes the motion better. It's definitely likely to be adopted, and Councillor Smith isn't likely to just disagree with it. So this is just a simple example of how you would deal with a friendly amendment. But you wouldn't necessarily be wanting to make your friendly amendment be that sponsorship be included for another event that was taking place, because that's not part of the main motion. The main motion is dealing with funding for the local Christmas parade. So friendly has to relate to the main motion.
Okay, there are many types of motions.
Question.
Sorry. Yeah.
So just in backing that up, it needs to be agreeable to the mover and the seconder?
If there is a seconder, yes.
Okay.
Not all motions have seconders, depending on whether you're in council or committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to motion types. So there are four general types of motions. Michelle did a good job of taking us through the main motion, but there are also subsidiary motions, and these are motions that change the treatment of the main motion, like an amendment. We have privilege motions, and they take precedence over any other motion, and they are not up for debate. And incidental motions are motions that ask for additional information on procedures or other motions. So we're going to talk about those in some detail. So subsidiary motions, again, is a type of motion assisting in treating or disposing of a main motion, such as an amendment, which we've already reviewed. As well as there are other subsidiary motions, and they include referee to a committee or refer to a committee, defer or postpone to a certain time, limit or extend the limits of debate, call the question, lay on the table, postpone indefinitely. And all of these motions are addressed in Robert's Rules of Order. And we've included the section number that you find them in the new draft procedure bylaw. And many of these are very straightforward, but as you've likely have dealt with some of them during the course of your deliberations, but we did want to highlight a couple of them that you may not be familiar with. So we've seen many council members use these two subsidiary motions interchangeably, but they're actually really different. So the first one is defer. It's the motion by which action on a pending question can be delayed to a definite day, time, meeting, or after a certain event. It should specify a definitive time to which the motion is deferred to. It can be debated, but only as to the time period of the postponement. So an example is I move to defer discussion of this request until a report is presented at our next regularly scheduled meeting. So I expect that the motion to defer is something that you use within your council meetings. But that's not likely the case with lay on the table, because this one isn't commonly used. So lay on the table allows the council to lay the main motion aside temporarily without setting a time for resuming its consideration, but with the provision that it can be taken up whenever the majority decides. The motion is usually made to accommodate something else that is more urgent. It applies to the main motion and any amendment. So what kind of more pertinent or urgent business are we talking about? Well, perhaps there's a scheduled presentation for a speaker. Maybe there's a time-sensitive matter that needs to be dealt with. If a council member moves to lay a motion on the table, the chair should ask the member what the more pertinent or urgent business is that requires the current motion to be delayed. Then the member should state the more important business. Then the motion to table is seconded, and then the vote is taken. The motion to lay on the table essentially moves aside the main motion that the group was discussing and puts the new item of business before council. The motion to lay on the table cannot be amended, as there's really nothing that can be added or subtracted from that motion. So let's take a look at an example. So during a council meeting, members are discussing a motion to approve a new design plan for a community splash pad. There's a lot of discussion, and during the discussion, before a final decision is made, the council receives urgent news from the CAO about a major plumbing issue in one of the branch libraries that requires immediate attention. In this scenario, a council member moves to lay the motion regarding the splash pad design on the table so they can shift focus to resolving the plumbing emergency. And then so once that urgent matter is addressed, council can later take the motion from the table and resume discussion on the new design plan for the community splash pad. A subsidiary motion that you may not be familiar with is limit or extend the limits of debate. So this motion can play an important role in managing discussions effectively. The motion to limit or extend limits of debate can either decrease or increase the allowed number of speeches, the length of speeches, and the total time for debate. So here's an example. I move that debate be limited to one speech of 2 minutes for each member, or I move that the speaker's time be extended 3 minutes. So by adjusting the number or length of speeches allowed, you can really ensure that all viewpoints are heard while maintaining a structured dialogue. So let's move on to privileged motions.
Question. Barb?
It relates to tabling. So your example was placing it on the table, lifting it from the table in the same meeting. And at one point, tabling could be an indefinite period of time where it would require a notice of motion with a 2/3 vote to lift from the table to bring back. So is it more of a deferral? I mean, we're going to defer this item to address the more urgent matter where because if I look here, it says postpone consideration of something requires a seconder, debatable, amendable, and it requires a majority vote. But table a motion, it requires a seconder, but it's not debatable, it's not amendable, and it requires a majority. Clarification.
Sure. So as they are definitely very different, and if you're going to follow proper parliamentary procedure, a deferral is you defer something to a specific time or date or after a certain event, as Michelle had mentioned. So if you're going to defer something, and let me give you another example for lay on the table. One of the other examples Michelle mentioned was maybe you've got a scheduled speaker that is going to come at 10 and they have another matter they have to get to at 10:30. So, you know, you're in the middle of this big debate on this design for a community splash pad. And, you know, the debate's going to go on a while longer because we're not all on the same page. So at 10 o'clock, recognizing that there's some urgency to getting this other presentation, this other speaker to be able to speak, you lay that on the table, not knowing necessarily how long everything is going to take, and you can just remove or take it off the table and resume those discussions when the other thing is done. With a postponement or a deferral, it's a specific time. So if you knew 100% that it was going to be 30 minutes before that you were going to need, you could postpone the discussion of that particular item for 30 minutes. But then you couldn't actually bring it back. Even if your presentation took 10 minutes, you essentially are now, you're not going to bring that item back for 30 minutes. So there is a little bit of nuance to it, and also lay on the table. It's intended to be because there's something urgent or really important, not just we'd like to defer because we want more information or we want to give staff a chance to be able to respond to another item, whatever the case may be. So there is some nuance. We suggest that it's very uncommon that you're going to lay a matter on the table. In most of your council deliberations that we've seen in our experience, usually we're postponing something because or deferring something because we want more information, or there's some other activity that's going to happen between now and the next meeting, and maybe a staff report or things like that. Lay on the table really is not used commonly. And I don't know if that helps to clarify or not. But we don't see it used very much in ours. That, you know, we for illustrative purposes, we came up with a scenario that would apply, but it could just as easily be that your maybe the plumbing issue, you've got a 2-hour meeting scheduled, and you might be one of those councilors or committees that at the end of your 2 hours, you're done, whether you're done or not. So you may know you have to deal with the plumbing emergency. So, and you've only got a few minutes left to do it. You're going to deal with that. And your item that's been laid on the table might be that it doesn't come up until the next meeting when you regroup and meet again.
Okay. I always thought that it required a notice of motion to bring it back.
No, it's just when the majority of the group determines that it should. I think it's advantageous if you've tabled something for several meetings to provide that notice in order to be able to allow the rest of council members to understand that we're going to be talking about this at that next meeting, but it isn't mandatory.
Okay, thank you.
So we are on to privileged motions.
Sorry, Michelle.
That's okay.
There we go.
Okay. So this type of motion does not relate to the pending business, but rather to items of immediate importance that should be allowed to interrupt the business. And none of these motions are debatable when a main motion or subsidiary motion is under consideration. Again, most of these are straightforward, but we wanted to highlight one of these motions with you. And that is call for the orders of the day. So it's a demand to return to the regular order of business. So really to insist that the agenda be followed. Calling for the orders of the day is appropriate when the discussion has drifted away from the agenda and a member wants to bring it back on track. So this would be in order unless there are other privileged motions that are pending. Incidental motions are a class of motions relating to the pending business in such a way that it must be decided immediately before any other business intervenes. And we've only listed on the slide the main ones that I think most of us would use or come across in your meetings. Again, we've already reviewed some of them, but these are a couple that warrant further consideration. And the first one is appeal the decision of the chair. So we talked about that a couple times during the presentation. It is an incidental motion that can cause some confusion. And this is when a member disagrees with the ruling of the chair, then the appeal can be made. The motion must be seconded, but the rules of debate change because the presiding officer is allowed to speak first to explain the reason for the ruling. Each member is then allowed to speak once in debate. After all who wish to speak have done so, the chair may again explain the reason for the ruling. And these rules hold even if the presiding officer normally doesn't have the right to speak in debate from the chair. And then the vote is taken not on the appeal, but rather on the chair's decision. So shall the decision of the chair be sustained? A majority vote sustains the decision of the chair, and a tie vote would also sustain the chair's decision, since it's presumed that the chair would vote to sustain his or her own decision. And people often think of rules of order as rigid and restrictive, unchanging and inflexible, but that's not necessarily the case. Parliamentary procedure allows council to suspend its own rules. A suspension of the rules allows a council committee to set aside its normal rules to do something it could not otherwise do. The option to temporarily suspend procedural rules enables a meeting to take an action, even if it violates one or more rules of order that might otherwise interfere. So sometimes dispensing with a procedural rule will actually enable a meeting to continue more efficiently. And examples include changing the normal order of business, amending the agenda after its adoption, or extending the scheduled end of a meeting so members can finish dealing with an important item. And section 3 of your draft procedural bylaw does allow for rules to be temporarily suspended by a 2/3 vote, with the exception of the following: any statutory requirements with respect to council proceedings, contractual agreements binding the municipality, amending the procedural bylaw, and quorum requirements. A motion for division of a question is used to split a motion into separate motions, which are debated and voted on separately. It can only be used if each part can stand as a separate question. And section 48 of your draft procedural bylaw allows for this, and the chair shall have discretion to determine if the motion can be divided. So here's an example. A council member makes a motion that a tree be planted in the courtyard to be decorated for the winter season, and that the decorations in the amount of $5,000 be purchased. Another member is supportive of the tree planting, but isn't supportive of spending the $5,000 on decorations. So they want to vote on the two parts of the motion separately. So they would say, I move to divide the motion so that the question of purchasing decorations can be considered separately. And point of information is another incidental motion. It's a request directed through the chair to another member or staff member for information relevant to the business at hand, but not related to parliamentary procedure. So point of information is used to request factual information on a matter being discussed. It does not introduce debate or express an opinion, but instead seeks neutral information or facts to help council proceed with informed decision-making. So here's a scenario to illustrate this point. So during a council meeting, the council is debating a proposed bylaw to introduce new parking regulations downtown. A councillor is unsure about a specific legal requirement related to the bylaw and needs clarification before proceeding with the discussion. In this example, the councillor wants to ask staff whether the municipal act requires public consultation before a council can pass the bylaw. So they state point of information, and through the chair, they ask staff to provide the requested information.
Okay, the final type of incidental motions that we want to highlight is what we refer to as the bring back motions. So, and the bring back motions do exactly that. They bring back business before the council that's already been adopted. There is no ranking among the motions. And again, this order on the screen is simply the order that they appear in Robert's Rules of Order. And it's important to note that changing something that your council has already decided should not be as easy as making the decision in the first place. So using these motions should not be done lightly, and consequently, these motions require a 2/3 vote without prior notice. So the first big bring back motion that I want to review is reconsider. The motion to reconsider enables council within a limited time and without notice to bring back for further consideration a motion that's already been voted on. If a motion to reconsider has been adopted, it temporarily nullifies the previous decision, the previous motion, and places the meeting immediately back at the point prior to the taking of the vote, and the original motion becomes before council as its next order of business. So why would you need to reconsider? Well, sometimes council makes a decision with the best information at the time. However, after a motion has been passed, maybe new facts emerge that weren't available during the initial discussion. And this could lead to the need for a reconsideration of the decision to address those new elements. And we want to emphasize that using these motions really shouldn't be done lightly, as they can seriously erode public trust if council frequently is seen to be changing its mind on decided matters. And of course, there should be a clear process for reconsideration in the procedure bylaw. And section 46 of the new draft bylaw does provide that clear process. Robert's Rules of Order states that a motion to reconsider is only allowed to be made in the same meeting at which the decided matter has occurred. However, most procedure bylaws in Ontario will allow for reconsideration at a subsequent meeting. That's very common. And the new draft bylaw does allow for this and states that any proposal for reconsideration any proposal to reconsider a decision of council must be made within its current term and can only be made once during the council term. And a motion to reconsider a resolution can only be made by a member who voted on the prevailing side of the motion or someone who didn't vote at all on the original motion. And a motion to reconsider itself cannot be reconsidered. And of course, any resolution that was decided cannot be reconsidered if action has been taken in implementing the resolution. So when might you want to proceed with a motion to reconsider? Well, here's an example. So a couple of meetings after a motion was made to award a contract, the municipality discovered that the company had filed for bankruptcy and was no longer able to meet the terms of the contract. So in this situation, council may need to reconsider the motion that awarded the contract so that the project is able to be completed by another company.
Question, Barb?
Because rescind is different from the reconsider. So just two questions. Motion to reconsider doesn't have to be, so in our current procedural bylaw, modus of reconsideration is distinguished between notice to revisit. And a notice to reconsider is specified as having to come forward in the same meeting in which the decision is made. I like this clarification. I think this is how most councils bring back an item. And so it's the same as revisit, but in 46.1, it says council may reconsider an entire resolution that was decided during any term of council. You just said in the term in which it was decided. So the council, it's 46.1. And I questioned this as to, does this mean that a reconsideration by a future council could, it could be, there could be a notice of reconsideration in the next term of council, provided the individual, well, it doesn't even have to be an individual who's on the prevailing side if they're no longer on council.
In which case it would be somebody that didn't vote on the original one, which could be another member that.
So it doesn't have to be within the term of council when the decision was made.
So
But
my
how often-
apologies for that one. So
Yeah.
Robert's Rules of Order, and I think that, and I apologize, I think we've got the two things, the presentation different than what the bylaw actually says. I think,
Because you said 46.1.
46.1, a council may reconsider an entire resolution that was decided during any term of council.
right,
A reconsideration of a portion of a resolution shall not be permitted.
right. So the presentation, unfortunately, I apologize, that's our error. And so the part in the bylaw does allow you to reconsider and even a previous resolution that was done in a previous term of council. Yes, that is council's prerogative. But you can only do it once in a council term. So
I
we will, I apologize. The information I gave in the presentation just now
No,
wasn't consistent.
no,
And,
that's okay.
I apologize. We've done this for many councils and I must have missed updating that one. So
How often would that occur?
very rarely. I can only think of one instance in my 30 years where that happened.
Okay. Well, thank you.
So the bylaw is correct and my presentation comments were not. So my apologies to council for that confusion.
It's a bazillion points to clerk on call and it's 1 point to council.
So you always follow your bylaw. Okay, so the next bring back motion that we want to talk about is rescind. So this is definitely different than the motion to reconsider. So this motion is used to change a decision that was adopted at a previous meeting. And it differs in that there is no time limit on making this motion, and any member, regardless of how they voted on the original question, can make it. So the motion to rescind requires a simple majority vote with advance notice or a 2/3 vote without advance notice. And again, it's really important to recognize from a practical standpoint, if some part of the decision has already been carried out, you cannot undo it, maybe an already completed purchase. So obviously you can't rescind that part of the motion, but any unexecuted part of a motion could be rescinded. And the last bring back motion is a motion to amend something previously adopted, which is very similar to rescind, and is used to change a motion by making a simple change or two or by substituting something else in its place. So this motion too requires a simple majority with advance notice or 2/3 without notice. And when would you use this type of motion? Well, it could be that you set a date for a public meeting that was established by resolution. And then after the fact, you realize you want to do it on a different date. So you could go back and amend something that was previously adopted to just change that little part of that motion, but you don't necessarily have to rescind the whole motion because you still want to go forward with the public meeting. You just want to tweak that little part of it. It might also be, maybe there's a situation, and this leads me into my next example, where council allocated $50,000 for the renovation of a local park. And then a few months later, they realized that the allocated amount was insufficient due to some unforeseen cost increases. So to address that, a council member made a motion to amend the previously adopted motion to increase the allocated amount by $70,000. So you still want to proceed with the renovation of the local park, but you realize you now need a different allocated amount. So this is just kind of an example that amends something previously adopted. It allows council to modify the original decision to better fit its current needs or circumstances. And now, having gone through these number of different types of motions, we want to help you be a parliamentary master at your meetings. So Clerks on Call has provided everyone with a copy of What Motion Do I Use cheat sheet. And we find that this is a particularly helpful chart that notes different actions that you might want to take during a meeting and how to phrase the correct motion. So for example, to end debate, you would say, I move the previous question or I call the question. So we've prepared this for you that we find having all of these actions on one piece of paper rather than having to flip through pages of your procedure bylaw makes it easier to reference during your meetings. And we also want to encourage you to share this tool with any other municipal staff or committee members that you think might benefit from having it as well.
So while we're talking about motions, we just have some quick points about voting on motions. And that is section 243 of the Municipal Act states that except as otherwise provided, every member of council shall have one vote. And decisions are made by a majority of the council members present at the meeting. All voting is to be done in open session by a show of hands, and this approach supports the transparency and accountability requirements of council. And section 48 of the new draft bylaw provides additional direction regarding voting. That is, after a motion is put to a vote, no member shall speak to it. All members of council will vote on all motions. If a member abstains or fails to vote, it's deemed to be a negative vote. Any vote on which there's a tie is deemed to be lost, and reported votes will be taken in random order, as is the current practice.
Question.
Yes.
Question. What are your thoughts on the convention that the chair may vote, except when there's a recorded vote where the chair shall vote? I
Yeah.
say except in convention because that's my interpretation.
Yeah, I see that a lot in terms of the chair then calls the question, everyone puts their hand up, the chair doesn't, it's carried, right? So I do see that a lot, but then I do see members of the chair that will, put their hand
Yep.
up because they want to emphasize that they are in favor
Sure.
of that motion as well. I think it makes it clear, I think, for everyone. And technically, if you don't vote, like we had said, that it actually means that maybe you don't, you're not voting. in
Don't
favor
support
of
it. Right.
And the bylaw actually says all members of council are to vote on all motions. So, you know, we've provided some, what happens if you don't, but, our suggestion that it is a best practice that everyone, including the mayor, whether it be, you know, when they do a show of hands, you simply put yours up while you're announcing the
Yep.
results. We think that it's just clear, not only for council members themselves, but also for members of the public that are watching is.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Barb?
Through you, on your cheat sheet, it and I'm thinking this is a recorded vote, requesting a recorded vote before or after, because it's spoken to in the procedural bylaw. Ask for a vote by actual count to verify voice vote. And you say, I call for a division of the House.
That's taken at Robert's Rules of Order, very much parliamentary speak there. but
Very,
That really kind of refers to a recorded vote.
thank you.
So, just some final thoughts as we conclude here. It's important not to get overwhelmed. Mastering council procedures does take a lot of time, not just for yourself as a member of council, but for staff and for members of the public. And so regular reviews like you are doing actually can really help council and staff, again, to make sure that your meetings are efficient and effective. And again, remember that the draft procedural bylaw that's before you has been based on input received from staff, but again, it needs to fit your municipality, right? So if there are changes, then you need to take a look at that before passing your bylaw. And we think too, whenever you get a chance, try to educate your public about the procedure bylaw. It's a lot to go through, and I understand probably members of the public may not be interested, but even if it's just during the public participation sessions or presentations, we think it's really important to dial them in as well. So before we open up to more questions that you might have, we just wanted to thank you for your time this afternoon. And we want to mention that this workshop was developed for general education purposes and does not constitute any legal or business advice. And so again, we've covered a lot, and thank you so much for your patience. But if there are any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And Michelle, thank you so much. It's been very informative. There's a lot of information there, like you said. I dare say you maybe made the chair's life a little more challenging, shall we say? So I will stand by a former mayor used to always tell me, you can do anything in a meeting unless somebody objects. But that said, I appreciate what you've done here for us. So, Madam Clerk, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair Milne. I just want to thank Michelle and Michelle as well. We've put a lot of work into this. We went back and forth a lot. I think we have a really good bylaw here, but I do want, the plan is, this is kind of the final. So I encourage council to ask questions now while they're here to answer them. And if there's anything pressing, then we can make those changes, but I see this as pretty well our final. We'll do maybe some last minute tweaks and then hoping to bring it back for final approval at our next meeting, May 7th. So basically, if you please comment now, or we can talk after the meeting as well. But if there's anything pressing, please bring it up.
All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any questions? Ken, did you? Oh, Martin, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Lindsay, and 20.3, with the publication, the agenda, is this going to cut back on the amount of addended motions we're going to get? And it says, unless determined by the clerk in consultation with the CAO. So what kind of things would you be looking at that instead of having a
Sure.
special meeting like on Friday?
Yes. Noted. No, so through you, Mayor Milne, it'll be much like our current procedure. We have cut down substantially on the amount of addendum agendas that we have been doing in the past. So yeah, the purpose of addendums are for those last minute kind of more emergency items that can't really wait until the next regular meeting. I've been diligently communicating with our senior management team to, make sure that if it's an addendum item, it's quite pressing. We don't want to get into the habit of always publishing an addendum. So the process won't look any different. We kept it the same with this bylaw, that the addendums will be published on the Monday at noon. But we don't foresee really a change in the frequency of them. Hopefully we'll keep them limited like we have been.
Thank you, Lindsay. And I do commend you and the staff for cutting back because it got to the point where I didn't even bother reading the agenda until the
Yeah.
amendment come out.
Yeah.
Because there was a whole different
Yeah.
bunch.
So
But anyway,
trying
that's
to do
good.
better, yeah.
Excellent. Oh, you are. You're doing way better. Thank you. At least in my eyes, anyway. Martin, are you?
Well, I had one more.
Follow
If
up?
Ken
Go ahead.
wants to go, no. And the other one, in sending this in writing to get a consent correspondence put back
Right.
in,
Mhm.
is there going to be a form like the note, like a template, or is it just going to be, Lindsay, here's an email? I would like
Yeah,
that. Make it simple.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Milne. We do have to speak internally more about it, but I don't foresee it having to be a formal process like that. Maybe, yeah, they're both shaking their heads. I wouldn't want that. To me, that's too, a quick email, hey, add that, XYZ, I think that suffices. Yeah,
Good.
but
Ken?
there will be
Oh.
more to come on that.
Yeah, okay. Ken?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Milne. If we could go back to the discussion about open forum, because I was asking a question during the break and I wanted to put it out so that council could hear it. My concern about open forum is always that in relation to planning applications and the Planning Act, there's very specific times when the public is given the opportunity to engage and provide council its feedback, regardless of what that is. And then there is a decision point. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are about open forum, because my concern is always, and this goes back to a comment you made earlier about the potential of a challenge to the meeting, that if a planning application doesn't follow the right process and there's an appeal, that's a doorway into an issue that could play out at OLT.
Right, yes, so we do believe that any comments made about planning applications should be done at that meeting, right? The public meeting for Planning Act applications. And so we can add a bullet point under public input to state that, and then that would give some leverage to the chair to indicate, we're open forum, the intention is not to speak to that because you need to follow the hearing process.
Right. Is this related to,
Very much so.
all right, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So through you to Ken, though, in the notices, it says that, in a public meeting, no decision will be in our script, no decision will be made, and your comments can be accepted up to the point of decision,
To the clerk.
to the clerk or to council. We're the ones making the decision. So and we don't have open forum at a public meeting. The public meeting is the open forum. But how is restricting their ability to have a final say?
I think you're getting confused possibly with we're meaning if basically limiting open forum it's not a public planning hearing. Come to the public planning hearing about whichever file, not open forum, I think is that. It's not, someone can still make comments about a public planning file up until they can submit them, they can whatever, but we're meaning those 3 minutes of open forum that they get, it's not a public planning hearing.
Yeah, and maybe if I can just add, your worship, when it comes to council for a decision, what's before you is the planning report and the bylaw. So you're now at a point that you're making that decision. And it's very important to be mindful of the process, because if you then start to invite comment outside of what the Planning Act stipulates, then that can open a door. I'm only mentioning it because we've seen it play out at the OLT as a risk. I'm just bringing it up as a risk mitigation. That's all.
Okay, well, we'll try to be mindful of that. Jason, you were next, please.
Just at the start of the motion section, where you said it had to be a positive motion. Maybe a little more clarity, like, I think we used the splash pad example, we were asking for more money or something. So what if something came up that we wanted to cancel the splash pad? Is that's not positive, so I wasn't sure, I just bit of clarity on that.
You can reconsider. So if you've made a motion, you want to undo that, then you can reconsider that. It's just that you shouldn't say, well, but we shouldn't move ahead with the splash pad project. Well, like, because if that motion loses, what does that mean? Does it mean that you are gonna go ahead with it? Like, it doesn't provide a lot of clarity. So when you're moving like a new motion, it should always be in the positive.
In the sense of taking action,
Right, I
as
see.
opposed to not taking action.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Oh, Jim, please.
Yeah, it was mentioned a little bit earlier about strong mayor powers. Should there be some reference put to this? I know I talked to the clerk about it as well when I read over the bylaw, just to tie them one way or the other.
Yeah,
that
so
It would take.
Yeah, we've had that inquiry from another municipality, and we had been, that municipality had been in contact with a lawyer, and it's actually section 1.4 under like the general section. It says, in the event of a conflict between this bylaw and any superior legislation, the provisions of the superior legislation will prevail. And so for clarity, we can add i.e. Strong mayor powers to that, but that section should, in our opinion, resolve any conflicts.
That would be the same for any legislation, really,
Correct.
from the province.
That's right.
Or the feds for that matter.
That's right.
Correct.
Okay. All right. If there's no other discussion, we have a motion on the floor to receive the bylaw or the procedural bylaw training session. I'll ask all those in favor. Oh, notice. Good. All right. All in favor. That's good. Thank you. We need to resolve back to council. Someone care to move that, please? Barb and Jim we move back into council meeting at 2:42. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. We have one motion coming out of committee of the whole into council, and that is the receiving of the procedural bylaw training, the draft procedural bylaw. Jim moves. Jason seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. We have no closed meeting. We have a confirming bylaw. Someone care to move that, please? Joan, thank you. Seconded by Martin. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. One final motion. Monica?
Yes, I'll move it.
Excellent. To adjourn, is there a seconder? Jim? All those in favor?